The first thing my best friend said after my date was, "You know he's not right for you, right?" He said it so casually that, for a second, I almost laughed. We were sitting across from each other in a crowded restaurant, finishing dinner after I had met the guy for coffee earlier that evening. I had actually enjoyed the date. Nothing dramatic had happened. No red flags. No awkward disaster. Just two men talking for a couple of hours and discovering that they might want to do it again. But apparently that was enough for my best friend to start building a case against him. "What did he do?" I asked. "Nothing." He took a sip of his drink. "That's the problem." I stared at him. "That doesn't make any sense." "He was too interested." "Isn't that usually a good thing?" He shrugged, but his expression stayed serious. Then he started listing small things he had noticed. The guy had checked his phone twice. He had asked me whether I was looking for something serious. He had made a joke my friend thought was insensitive. None of it sounded important enough to explain the reaction sitting across from me. I pushed my plate away and smiled. "You know, you've said this about every guy I've dated." His eyes flickered toward mine before he looked away. "Because every guy you've dated has had something wrong with him." "Every single one?" "Pretty much." I laughed again, expecting him to laugh with me. He didn't. That was when I noticed something I had somehow missed before. He wasn't teasing me. He genuinely hated the idea of me seeing this guy again. "What exactly do you want me to do?" I asked. "Never date anyone?" "That's not what I said." "Then what are you saying?" He went quiet. For a moment, the noise of the restaurant seemed louder around us. I knew him well enough to recognize when he was avoiding an answer. We had been best friends long enough that silence between us usually meant something. Still, I wasn't worried yet. This was just him being protective. He had always been like that. Too observant. Too opinionated. Too convinced he could see problems before I did. So I let it go. At least I thought I did. Because as we left the restaurant, he looked back at me and asked, "You're not actually going to see that guy again, are you?" And this time, I didn't know why the question bothered me more than his opinion ever had before. The question stayed with me all the way home. "You're not actually going to see that guy again, are you?" It should have sounded like nothing more than a friend's opinion. Instead, I kept replaying it, wondering why he had sounded almost disappointed. By the next morning, I had mostly convinced myself I was overthinking it. My best friend had always been the person who noticed things I missed. If someone talked too loudly, he noticed. If someone lied, he noticed. If someone treated me badly, he noticed before I did. So maybe this was just another example. Still, there was something different about the way he remembered every detail about the men I dated. I hadn't even remembered that my last boyfriend hated crowded places, but my best friend had. He remembered where we had gone on our second date, what we had argued about, and exactly when I had stopped texting him. When I brought it up over coffee, he barely looked surprised. "You tell me everything," he said. "That's not an excuse for remembering all of it." He smiled. "Maybe you just don't pay attention." I rolled my eyes. Then I mentioned the guy from the restaurant the night before. Immediately, his expression changed. It was small, but I saw it. "What about him?" he asked. "Nothing. I was just saying I might see him again." "Why?" The question came too quickly. "Because I liked him." He looked down at his coffee. "You barely know him. That's generally how first dates work." He didn't answer. Instead, he started pointing out things I had already told him. The guy had asked whether I wanted a serious relationship. He had noticed when I was uncomfortable. He had even remembered the kind of coffee I ordered. My best friend had an explanation for every one of those things. Too eager. Too observant. Trying too hard. "You do realize you're doing it again, right?" I said. "Doing what?" "Finding something wrong with him." "I'm finding something wrong with his behavior." "You haven't even met him properly." He leaned back and crossed his arms. "I don't need to." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. And that bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The strangest part was that he seemed to know things about my dates that even I didn't consider important. He remembered who made me nervous, who made me laugh, who I had wanted to see again, and who I had stopped talking about. Every time I thought about it, the pattern became harder to ignore. He didn't simply dislike my boyfriends. He paid attention to them. Far more attention than a person who supposedly didn't care about them should have. I still didn't know what that meant. But for the first time, I started wondering whether I had been looking at the wrong question all along. Maybe it wasn't why every guy I dated had something wrong with him. Maybe it was why my best friend needed there to be something wrong with every one of them. By the end of the week, I had decided I was done letting my best friend make every dating decision for me. I was going to see the guy again, and this time I wasn't going to ask for an opinion first. Maybe that was why I felt strangely determined when I met him that weekend. He was easy to talk to, funny without trying too hard, and somehow remembered little things from our first date. When I mentioned that I hated overly sweet coffee, he remembered and ordered mine exactly the way I liked it. It was such a small thing, but it made me smile. Then I noticed my best friend watching from across the room. He had agreed to meet us for a little while, and I had expected him to be skeptical. I hadn't expected him to look almost irritated. "You remembered his order?" my best friend asked him. "Yeah," the guy said with a smile. "He mentioned it the other night." My best friend nodded slowly. "That's impressive." His voice made the compliment sound like the opposite. I gave him a warning look, but he ignored it. A few minutes later, the conversation moved on. My date asked me about something I had mentioned earlier in the week, and I realized he had actually been listening. I laughed, and my best friend went quiet. When my date excused himself for a moment, I turned toward him. "Can you please just give him a chance?" I asked. "I am giving him a chance. You look like you're waiting for him to confess to a crime." He frowned. "I'm just paying attention." "To what?" "Everything." That answer stopped me. He said it like it was obvious. Then my date came back and handed me the coffee I had mentioned wanting earlier. He had remembered that too. "I figured you might want another one," he said. I smiled and thanked him. Across from me, my best friend's expression tightened. It lasted only a second, but I saw it. He looked away, then asked my date a question that sounded harmless until I realized what he was doing. He wanted to know how serious he was about me. My date answered honestly, "I don't know yet, but I like him." My best friend nodded. "Right?" Something about that single word made the air between us uncomfortable. Later, when my date and I were alone for a moment, he touched my arm lightly and asked if I wanted to see him again. I said yes. There was no hesitation. When I looked back toward my best friend, he was watching us. Not judging the man this time, watching me, and when our eyes met, he immediately looked away. I had seen him annoyed before. I had seen him protective. I had even seen him jealous of my time. But this felt different. This wasn't about whether the guy was good enough. For the first time, I had the uncomfortable feeling that my best friend wasn't reacting to the man at all. He was reacting to me choosing him. After my date left, I waited until we were outside before saying anything. My best friend walked beside me with his hands in his pockets, staring straight ahead as if nothing unusual had happened. "Why did you ask him how serious he was about me?" I asked. "I was curious." "No, you weren't." He glanced at me. "You seem pretty sure about that." "Because you don't ask questions like that unless you already have an opinion." He sighed. "I just don't trust him." "You don't trust anyone." "That's not true." "Then tell me what he did." He stopped walking. For a moment, neither of us said anything. "He likes you," he finally said. "Yes." "Too quickly. We've been on 2 dates." "Exactly." Stared at him. "You realize how ridiculous that sounds, right?" He looked away. "I'm trying to keep you from getting hurt." "You always say that." "Because it's true." His voice had become sharper now. "You don't see what people are like when they want something from you. And you do. Sometimes." I shook my head. "You've done this with every guy." He didn't answer. "Every single one," I continued. "You hated the last guy because he was too distant. Before that, you hated someone because he was too friendly. Another guy was too ambitious. Another one wasn't ambitious enough. You always have a reason." His jaw tightened. Maybe you keep picking the wrong people. Maybe. I took a breath. But what if I don't? That finally made him look at me. What if this guy is actually good for me? What if I like him? What if I want to see where this goes? His expression changed so quickly that I almost missed it. Hurt first, then something harder. Then you should do whatever you want. That's not what you mean. It is. Then why are you angry? He opened his mouth, but no answer came. That silence felt heavier than anything he could have said. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Are you jealous? His eyes snapped back to mine. For 1 second, I thought he might finally tell me. Instead, he laughed once, without humor. Of him? Yes. Don't be ridiculous. Then what is it? I'm your best friend. I know. I've known you longer than he has. That doesn't answer my question. He looked away again. I don't like watching people walk into your life and act like they know you. You don't have to like it. I know. Then stop interfering. His face tightened. Fine. The word came too quickly. I knew him. He wasn't agreeing. He was retreating. We walked the rest of the way in silence, and for the first time since we had become friends, the silence between us didn't feel comfortable. It felt like something had been pushed into the open without either of us knowing what to call it. I went home still thinking about his reaction. Not because I suddenly understood it. I didn't. But because his answer had changed one thing. I no longer believed he was simply trying to protect me, and if he wasn't protecting me, then I had no idea what he wanted. For the next few days, I tried to act like nothing had changed. My best friend seemed to be doing the same. We still texted, still joked, still talked about ordinary things, but there was a carefulness between us that hadn't been there before. I kept telling myself it would disappear if I stopped thinking about that conversation. Then, one evening, I told him that the guy I had been seeing wanted to make things more serious. I expected the usual questions. Instead, my best friend went completely still. How serious? He asked. Pretty serious. What does that mean? It means we're talking about being exclusive. He looked down at the table. Already. We've been seeing each other for a while. I know. The way he said it made me look up. You know? You've told me. Right? He nodded, but he didn't smile. I waited for the familiar criticism, but none came. Somehow that was worse. Say it, I said. Say what's wrong with him. Nothing. I blinked. Nothing. I didn't say he's perfect. You didn't say anything. He rubbed his hands together and stared at the table. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to be honest. I am. No, you're avoiding it. He finally looked at me. There was something tired in his expression. You want the truth? Yes. He took a breath. I hate seeing you with other guys. The words landed harder than I expected. I didn't know what to say. He looked away almost immediately, as if he regretted saying them. Why? I asked quietly. Because I don't like it. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have. Are you jealous? He was silent. Then he gave a small, frustrated laugh. Yes. I stared at him. You're actually jealous. Don't make it bigger than it is. How am I supposed to do that? Because jealousy doesn't automatically mean what you think it means. I didn't know what I thought it meant. That was the problem. Then what does it mean? I asked. He shook his head. It means I don't like watching someone else become important to you. That sentence stayed between us. It was more honest than anything he had said before, but still didn't explain why. You're my best friend, I said. You already matter to me. That's different. How? He looked at me for a long moment, then looked away. I don't know. I wanted to push harder, but something in his face stopped me. He had finally admitted something he had spent years refusing to name, yet he still seemed determined to keep the rest of it locked away. I realized then that his jealousy wasn't really about the guy I was dating. It was about the possibility of me choosing someone else. But even after he admitted that, I still couldn't understand what exactly he was afraid of losing. And he couldn't seem to admit it either. After that conversation, my best friend pulled away. Not completely, not in any dramatic way. He still answered my messages, still sent me stupid jokes, still asked whether I had eaten. But something had changed. He stopped asking about the guy I was seeing. He stopped making comments about my dates. He even stopped offering his opinion unless I asked for it. I should have been relieved. Instead, I kept noticing his absence in places where I had never thought to look for it before. I would see something funny and instinctively reach for my phone, then remember that he wasn't talking to me the way he usually did. At first, I told myself I was only missing my best friend. Then I started wondering whether I had been relying on him more than I realized. The guy I was dating noticed it too. One evening, after we had spent time together, he asked, "Is something going on with you?" I told him I was fine. He didn't argue. He just looked at me for a moment. "You don't seem fine." I didn't know how to explain it. Nothing was wrong with him. That was almost the problem. He was kind, attentive, and genuinely interested in me. I liked being with him. I should have been able to enjoy that without thinking about anyone else. But every time something good happened between us, part of me wondered what my best friend would have said about it. Eventually, the guy I was dating asked the question I had been avoiding. "Is this about your best friend?" I went quiet. "I don't know," I said. "That's what worries me." He nodded slowly. "You two are really close. We've always been close." "I can see that." He didn't sound angry. He sounded careful. "But sometimes it feels like there's a conversation between you two that I'm not part of." I wanted to tell him there wasn't. I wanted to believe there wasn't. But after the last few days, I couldn't say it with confidence. Meanwhile, my best friend seemed determined to give me space. He didn't interfere anymore. He didn't criticize the relationship. He didn't ask whether I was happy. He simply stepped back, almost as if he had decided that being less involved was the only fair thing he could do. Somehow, that hurt more than all his arguments had. I started remembering how often he had been there before anyone else. Every important decision, every bad date, every night I couldn't sleep, every stupid little victory. I had always told him first. Now there was a strange empty space where his voice usually was. And that made me realize something uncomfortable. I had spent so much time trying to understand why he hated the men I dated that I hadn't asked myself why his absence bothered me so much. I still didn't have an answer, but I was beginning to suspect that figuring out what he wanted wasn't the only problem anymore. I needed to figure out what I wanted too. The next evening, the guy I was dating asked me if I had made a decision. We were sitting together after dinner, and there was no accusation in his voice. That somehow made it harder. "About us," he said. "I need to know where this is going." I looked down at my hands. "I care about you. I know. And I like being with you. I know that too." He paused. "But I also know that part of you is somewhere else." I didn't answer. He wasn't asking me to explain something I didn't understand. He was asking me to be honest about something I had already started feeling. "I don't want to keep you waiting while I figure myself out," I finally said. He nodded, looking disappointed but not surprised. "Then figure it out." His words followed me home. I kept thinking about how simple the choice should have been. I liked this man. He had done nothing wrong. If my best friend hadn't complicated everything, maybe I would have known exactly what I wanted. But that wasn't the truth anymore. Something between my best friend and me had changed, and pretending otherwise was becoming unfair to everyone involved. I decided I had to talk to him. Before I could, he called me. His voice sounded different, tired, careful. "I need to say something," he said. "Okay. I've been thinking about everything you said." I waited. "I wasn't fair to you." "What do you mean?" "About the guys you dated." He took a breath. "I kept finding reasons to dislike them. Some of those reasons were real. Some probably weren't." "Probably? Okay. Most of them weren't." I sat down. "Why?" There was a long silence. "Because I didn't know what else to do." My chest tightened. "Do about what?" He didn't answer immediately. "I should have stayed out of your relationships. You never asked me to decide who was good enough for you." "Then why did you?" "Because I couldn't stand watching you move closer to someone else." He sounded almost embarrassed saying it. "I thought if I found enough reasons, maybe you'd slow down. Maybe you'd notice something. Maybe you'd decide not to stay. That's not fair. I know. You could have hurt me. I know. His voice dropped. That's why I'm done doing it. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was angry. Another part of me was relieved that he was finally admitting how deliberate some of it had been. But there was still one question sitting underneath everything. Why did it matter so much? He went quiet again. Because you matter to me. You've always said that. I know. That's not enough anymore. Another silence. Then he said, I think you deserve the chance to choose your own life, even if that life doesn't include me the way it used to. The words frightened me more than his jealousy ever had. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm going to stop getting in your way. And for the first time, I realized that if he truly meant it, I might actually lose him. I found him at the place where we had spent countless ordinary evenings together. A place that suddenly felt different because neither of us could pretend this conversation was ordinary. He was already there when I arrived, sitting quietly and staring at the floor. When he looked up, his expression made me stop. He looked scared, not nervous, not uncomfortable, scared. You said you were going to stop getting in my way. I said. I meant it. Then tell me the truth before you do. He looked at me for a long moment. The truth is, I never hated every guy you dated. I waited. I hated what happened whenever you started choosing someone else. My chest tightened. Why? He swallowed. Because every time you got serious with someone, I thought I was losing you. You could have told me that. I couldn't. Why not? He gave a small, painful smile. Because then I would have had to admit why losing you scared me so much. I said nothing. He looked down at his hands. I've been in love with you for years. The words were quiet, but they changed everything. For a moment, I couldn't move. Suddenly, all those strange reactions had a shape. The questions, the criticism, the way he remembered every detail, the way he watched whenever someone else made me happy. None of it had been random. He had been fighting something he didn't know how to say. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. Because you were my best friend. He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. You were the one person I couldn't afford to lose. If I told you and you didn't feel the same way, I wouldn't just lose a boyfriend. I could lose you. So you pushed everyone else away instead? I know how bad that sounds. It was bad. I know. He looked directly at me. That's why I'm not asking you to choose me. I shouldn't. I spent too long trying to make choices for you because I was afraid of what you'd choose without me. That was the part one hadn't expected. He wasn't trying to convince me. He wasn't asking me to leave anyone. He wasn't even asking for another chance. He was finally giving me the freedom he had been afraid to give me. What happens now? I asked. Whatever you want. And if I don't choose you? His eyes lowered. Then I'll have to accept it. That answer hurt more than I expected. Because somewhere between all his jealousy and all the arguments, I had started seeing him differently too. I had spent days asking why his absence felt wrong. Why I kept noticing the empty space he left behind. Why the thought of building a life without him felt heavier than it should. I finally understood that I hadn't been searching for an explanation for his feelings alone. I had been avoiding my own. I don't want you to step out of my life, I said. He looked up. You don't. I shook my head. No. Then what do you want? I took a breath. I want to know what this could be if we stop being afraid of it. He stared at me as if he didn't trust what he had heard. Are you sure? I'm sure I want to try. He didn't move immediately. Neither did I. Then he reached for my hand, slowly enough that I could have pulled away. I didn't. His fingers closed around mine, and for the first time, neither of us needed to pretend that the moment meant anything less than it did. We had spent years protecting our friendship from the possibility of becoming something else. Now I was choosing to risk the friendship because I finally understood that what I felt for him was worth that risk. He squeezed my hand. I really thought telling you would ruin everything. I smiled. You already ruined it. His face fell. In the best possible way. And when he laughed, the tension between us finally broke. Not because the past had disappeared, but because we had finally stopped denying what had been there all along. For the first time in a long time, nothing between us felt like a question we were afraid to ask. We were still sitting there with our hands together, but the silence had changed. It wasn't the uncomfortable silence from the night I had confronted him about my dates. This one felt calm, honest. I thought about everything that had happened over the past few weeks and how differently I saw it now. Every boyfriend had seemed to become a problem because, underneath all the reasons my best friend gave, there had always been the same fear. He hadn't wanted to lose his place in my life. He had just been too afraid to tell me what that place really meant to him. So, I said, trying to make the moment lighter, "What happens when I tell you about the next guy I date?" He smiled. "I guess I don't get to hate him anymore. That's disappointing. You were very committed to that." He laughed. "I was terrible. You were." He looked at me, then squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry." This time I believed him. Not because the past didn't matter, but because he wasn't defending it anymore. He had finally admitted what his behavior had been hiding, and I had finally admitted that losing him had frightened me too. The difference was that neither of us was trying to control what happened next. We had chosen it. I ended things with the other relationship honestly, without pretending the other man had done anything wrong. He deserved someone who wasn't looking over his shoulder at a friendship that had already become something more complicated. My best friend never asked me to make that choice for him. That mattered. He had told me the truth and left the decision with me. Now, when we talked about the future, there was no need to invent reasons or pretend we were discussing someone else. A few days later, we were sitting together again, laughing about how absurd the whole thing had been. He shook his head. "I still can't believe you dated some of those guys." I smiled. "You mean the guys you hated?" "Exactly. And now," he looked at me for a second, "now I don't have to hate anyone." "Why's that?" He leaned closer, his smile returning. "Because this time, the guy you choose is me." I laughed, but my chest tightened in the best possible way. For years, he had asked what was wrong with every man I dated. Now I finally knew the answer. Nothing had ever been wrong with them. The problem was that the person I had been looking for had been sitting beside me all along, waiting for me to see him differently. And this time, neither of us was pretending.